was our anniversary weekend, the first time in almost 3 years that my wife and I had gotten away without the baby. We had a nice hotel booked downtown, dinner reservations, everything. All we needed was a reliable babysitter. We found her through a local Facebook parents group. Tons of good reviews, lots of comments about how great she was with kids. Her name was Amber, 18, fresh out of high school. We interviewed her twice. She seemed sweet, responsible, a little shy maybe, but fine. The first night went perfectly. She texted us updates every few hours, pictures of our son coloring, videos of him giggling on the floor with his blocks, a little blurry photo of him tucked into his crib. I slept like a rock. The second night, though, things felt off. No updates. At around 7 p.m., we sent her a casual, "Hey, how's everything going?" No reply. An hour passed. We tried calling. Straight to voicemail. Tried again. Same thing. By 9:30, my wife was practically vibrating with anxiety. We packed up our stuff, checked out early, and sped home. When we pulled into the driveway, my stomach sank. The porch light was off. No lights inside the house either. Everything dark. I unlocked the door, my hands shaking. The living room was empty. Amber's backpack was still by the couch. Her jacket was slung over the armrest. Her shoes sat by the door, but no Amber. My heart pounded as I ran upstairs, pushed open the nursery door, and there he was, our son, sleeping peacefully, blissfully unaware of anything wrong. We checked every inch of the house, nothing missing, nothing broken, no sign of a struggle, but Amber was just gone. I checked our Nest Cam footage immediately. At around 7:02 p.m., you can see Amber sitting on the couch scrolling through her phone. She looks normal, calm. Then she suddenly freezes, turns her head toward the front door. She stands up slowly, still staring. Then she steps off camera, and she never comes back. The front door swung open around 7:04 p.m., wide enough that you can just barely see the dark street beyond. The door stayed open for almost 15 minutes before swinging shut in the wind. We called the police, obviously. They found out her phone last pinged near a commuter train station 2 towns over about an hour after she left. But they didn't find any more traces of her. Not even a missing persons report from her family. We never heard from her again. To this day, I still wonder, what made her walk out without a word? What did she see or hear that scared her enough to abandon a sleeping child? And sometimes late at night, I wonder if whoever or whatever scared her is still out there. Back in 2018, I lived in a 3-story apartment building just outside a college campus. I was on the 2nd floor, apartment 202, and I liked it. It was cheap, close to work, and quiet most of the time. The apartment directly above me, 302, was vacant for months. I only knew because I asked about it when I moved in. The leasing agent said it had water damage and was under renovation. I never heard anything up there, never saw workers or tenants, until one day someone moved in. I was leaving for work and saw a man in the stairwell, hauling a box. He looked rough, older, late 40s maybe, scruffy, wearing a gray hoodie with the hood up even though it was like 80 degrees. I said hey as I passed, but he didn't respond. Just kind of glanced at me, then looked away. That was the first time I saw him. It wouldn't be the last. Over the next couple weeks, I started getting noise complaints from management. They said people were reporting yelling and loud banging coming from my unit. The weird part, I wasn't even home when most of them were filed. I told the office it wasn't me, and they said they'd look into it. Then my neighbor across the hall mentioned something strange. She asked if I'd had friends over lately. I told her no. She said she thought she saw someone unlock my door and go inside one afternoon. Tall guy, hoodie, looked like the guy upstairs. That night I installed a cheap $40 camera pointing at my door. It was motion activated, with night vision, just something to give me peace of mind. 3 nights later I got the alert. The camera had captured someone outside my door around 3:12 a.m. It was the guy from 302, no question. He was standing there facing the door, slowly jiggling the handle. Over and over. Then he leaned in close and just listened. His face was inches from the peephole. He didn't knock, didn't speak, just stood there for nearly 3 minutes. Then he slowly turned and walked back up the stairs. I took the footage to the leasing office and they called the police. Turns out this guy had a history. He'd been evicted from another complex nearby for the same thing, trying to enter other people's apartments. When they searched his place, they found a small crowbar, gloves, and a set of homemade bump keys hidden in a drawer. He was arrested, but only held for a couple nights. They said they didn't have enough to charge him with more than trespassing and attempted unlawful entry. I broke my lease and moved out the next month. I still don't know if he ever got into my apartment, but the thought that he might have been standing in my living room when I wasn't home still haunts me. And every time I hear footsteps outside my door, my heart skips a beat. It was Easter Sunday, 2019. I was 21 at the time, home from college for the weekend, and my family had decided to do something different that year. Instead of the usual dinner, my aunt suggested we do an Easter egg hunt at a park near her place in rural Pennsylvania. Kind of corny, but it was mostly for the little kids in the family, and we all went along with it. The park wasn't anything special, just a wide clearing surrounded by trees, a playground, and some picnic tables. But it was quiet, scenic, and honestly a nice place to kill a few hours. We got there around noon. My mom and aunt started setting up the food while my uncle and I walked around hiding the eggs. While we were doing that, I noticed this guy, way out in the tree line. At first I thought he was just another parent from some other gathering, but he was wearing a full-body Easter bunny costume. Big white suit, big plastic head, and he was just standing there. No kids with him, not moving, just watching. I nudged my uncle and pointed him out. He squinted, shrugged, and said something like, "Probably one of those paid party guys or whatever." We didn't think much of it at the time. But even when we finished hiding the eggs and started letting the kids loose, that bunny was still standing there, totally still. Eventually, he walked off into the woods, not toward the road or a parking lot, just into the trees. I kept an eye out, just in case, but the day went on without anything weird. We ate, cleaned up, and headed home. That night, I was lying in bed, scrolling through pictures from the day, when I noticed something. In one of the shots of my cousins hunting for eggs, way in the background, there he was, the bunny, still in the trees, still watching, and I swear to God he was closer than I remembered. That night, around 2 a.m., I was in the kitchen getting water when I saw something through the front window, a flash of white near our driveway. I froze and turned off the light. I stood there in the dark for maybe a full minute, staring out the window. I thought maybe it was a car's headlights hitting a bush or something, but then I saw it again. Movement. Someone walking across our lawn, not running, just walking. And I could see the ears. I didn't wake anyone up. I didn't call the cops. I just stood there, heart pounding, and waited until I couldn't see him anymore. I barely slept. The next morning, I convinced myself I imagined it. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe someone saw the guy at the park and was copying him. I left later that day to drive back to campus. About a week later, my mom called me. She sounded off, shaky. She asked if I remembered the Easter bunny guy from the park. I said yes. She told me she saw something on the local news. A man in a bunny costume had been arrested after breaking into a house in a neighboring town. He hadn't stolen anything. He didn't even try to hurt anyone. But when the family came home early from vacation, they found him standing in their daughter's room. He had taken all her Easter candy and arranged it around the bed in a perfect circle, just standing there, not moving, just watching. Police found multiple costumes in his car. They said he had maps of several local parks, ours included. He had marked spots on them, and one of the markings, right where my little cousin found the golden egg. It was a Saturday afternoon, the kind where everything feels a little too peaceful. Bright sun, clear blue sky. My daughter tugged on my hand, laughing, begging me to push her on the swings. We went to this small park just a few blocks from our house, the kind of place you only find if you live nearby. I knew almost every parent by sight. I could even name most of the kids. But that day, I noticed someone new. A man, sitting alone on the far bench under the old oak tree. No kid near him, no stroller, just sitting there, hands in his lap, staring across the playground. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe he was waiting for someone. Maybe his kid was off in the bathroom. But after 15-20 minutes, still just sitting, still just staring. The weirdest part was that he wasn't even pretending to look at his phone. He wasn't reading, just watching. Especially watching the younger kids and the parents who weren't paying attention. I kept one eye on him as my daughter ran from the jungle gym to the sandbox. Then I saw it. He pulled out his phone, held it up, and angled it straight toward the playground. No shame, no attempt to hide it. At that point, adrenaline kicked in. My hands were sweating even though it wasn't that hot out. I stood up, walked slowly toward him. I didn't even know what I was going to say. He saw me coming. His body stiffened. Then he stood up, tucked the phone into his jacket, and started briskly walking toward the parking lot. Without even thinking, I yelled, "Hey, you forgot something!" He didn't look back. He picked up the pace. I chased him for maybe 30 feet before he sprinted the last few yards to a beat-up gray sedan parked crooked by the curb. He got in and peeled out so fast he almost sideswiped a Honda pulling into the lot. The cops showed up about 20 minutes later. I gave them a description: black hoodie, thin, scruffy beard, early 40s maybe. A few days later, they called me back. Apparently, that same car had been reported near 2 other playgrounds, one in the next town over, and another where, 2 weeks earlier, a 5-year-old boy had gone missing for several terrifying hours. They found him later in the woods, miles from the park, shaken, cold, but alive. He wouldn't say much about what happened, only that a man had offered him a toy if he came to see something. I don't let my daughter out of my sight anymore at the park, not even for a second. I've always been the kind of person who just wants to stay out of other people's business. I keep to myself, stay quiet, and get along with most people. I had found a small basement apartment in an old house right off campus. It was cheap, and it wasn't the nicest place, but it was perfect for me at the time. I didn't need much. The landlord, an older man named Mr. Harris, seemed harmless enough. He lived upstairs with his wife. Quiet, reserved, never made much of an impression on me. I'd see him occasionally, doing yard work or sitting on the porch, but that was about it. Everything seemed normal at first. The first month passed with no issues. The apartment wasn't luxurious, but it was comfortable enough. There was one window in the living room, but it faced the back of the house, so it didn't get much sunlight. The basement smelled faintly of mildew, and the walls were old and creaky. But again, it was a place to live. That was all I cared about. But then, weird things started happening. One night I came home after a long day of classes. As usual, I unlocked the door to my apartment, but something was off. The door was slightly ajar, just enough to notice. Now I know I always lock my door. I'm pretty obsessive about it, honestly, so I couldn't understand how it could have been open. I checked the lock. It was fine. Maybe I had just forgotten. But then, a few days later, the same thing happened. I came home and the door was open again. This time, I felt a little uneasy. I hadn't left the door open. I checked all the windows, all the locks. Everything was fine, except for the fact that the door had been left open. I couldn't explain it. So I did what anyone would do in my situation. I brushed it off. Maybe I was just forgetting, maybe I was too tired. But it kept happening. Over the course of a couple weeks, I started noticing more odd things. I would leave a jacket or a book in one spot, and it would be moved. The fridge would be slightly open when I'd come home, even though I hadn't touched it. Small, subtle things, but it started gnawing at me. One night, I came home late, around 2 a.m., after studying with some friends. I was exhausted, and the apartment was quiet, too quiet. I had the same eerie feeling as before, but I shook it off and went straight to bed. But then, in the middle of the night, I was jolted awake by the sound of something faint, like a soft click. The kind of sound you'd hear when a door is opening. My heart skipped a beat. I tried to ignore it, but it happened again, louder this time. The distinct sound of a deadbolt turning. I felt my entire body freeze. I lay still, listening. It was dead silent for a moment. And then I heard the faintest creak. The door to my apartment had opened. I jumped out of bed and grabbed the closest thing I could find, a lamp. I crept to the door, my heart hammering in my chest. My mind was racing. Was it Mr. Harris? Had he come down to check on me for some reason? I opened the door, but there was no one in the hallway. I checked the stairs leading up to the main floor, but there was nothing. I felt a cold wave of dread wash over me. I quickly locked the door behind me and called my mom, just to calm myself down. She told me I was just paranoid, but I wasn't convinced. The next morning, I went to speak to one of the neighbors, hoping to get a sense of what was going on. That's when I found out the truth. Turns out, Mr. Harris had been arrested for breaking into tenants' apartments years ago. He had keys to every apartment in the building, and his strange behavior wasn't just a quirk, it was something darker. Some of his former tenants had complained about hearing footsteps at night, seeing things moved around in their apartments. And worse, a few of them had even reported that they'd caught him standing in their rooms while they were asleep. I never stayed in that apartment again. I packed up everything the next day and found somewhere else to live. But to this day, I can't help but wonder, how many times was he standing in my room, watching me as I slept, waiting for the right moment? I grew up in rural Nebraska, on a farm that had been in my family for generations. It was just me, my younger sister Abby, and our grandparents. Our parents had passed away in a car crash when I was 10, so we'd moved out to live with Grandpa and Grandma full-time after that. Life on the farm was routine, predictable. Wake up at 5, feed the animals, check the irrigation, rotate the fields. Honestly, I didn't mind it. There was something peaceful about it all. The smell of soil, the early morning mist, the way the wind rustled the corn like waves on a quiet lake. But the isolation, that's something you don't fully understand until you've lived it. The nearest neighbor was 3 miles away. The nearest town, a tiny place called Maplewood, was about a 25-minute drive, and the only law enforcement was one part-time sheriff who mostly dealt with speeding tickets and the occasional bar fight. That summer I was 17. Just old enough to take on more responsibility, and old enough to think I didn't need to be afraid of anything. It was mid-July, sweltering, and the days were long and exhausting. We were just a few weeks out from the corn harvest, which meant we were checking the irrigation daily, patching up storm-damaged fencing, and keeping a lookout for raccoons or deer that might get into the crops. That Thursday started like any other. Grandpa and I were up before sunrise, sipping burnt coffee and listening to the local AM weather. Grandma was already baking bread. Abby was still asleep upstairs. Around noon, Grandpa sent me out to the east field with a toolbox to fix a busted valve near the irrigation channel. I finished the job a little after 3 p.m., and I remember sitting on the tailgate of the truck, drinking a warm root beer, watching heat waves ripple over the corn. Then I saw something strange. A patch of corn a few hundred feet away, completely flattened. It didn't look like storm damage. It looked trampled. I didn't think much of it at the time. Figured maybe a deer had panicked and run through. But that night, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned deep orange, Grandpa told me to do the evening perimeter walk alone. He wasn't feeling well. It was the first time in weeks he'd missed it. I grabbed the flashlight and set off, starting at the south end and working my way east. The corn was tall, over my head, and thick enough that you couldn't see more than a few feet into it from the dirt path that ringed the field. It was dead quiet, the kind of quiet that only exists in places far from highways, far from civilization. No wind, no birds, just the crunch of gravel under my boots. When I reached the eastern edge of the field, the same area where I'd seen the flattened patch earlier, I noticed more damage. Several rows of corn stalks had been stomped flat, and the dirt had been disturbed, footprints. Boot prints, big ones, deeper than anything I could make. They led directly into the corn. I should have gone back, but I didn't. I followed the prints maybe 30 or 40 yards in, deeper and deeper into the rows. The corn muffled everything. It was like walking underwater. Then I saw it. A tent, old, stained, set up right there in the middle of the field. Hidden from the road, from the house, from everything. It was low to the ground, half collapsed, like it had been there for weeks. I stopped. My stomach turned. I knew that wasn't ours. No one had permission to be here. Outside the tent was a pile of empty food cans, cigarette butts, and an old backpack. Someone had been living here. I crouched down and peeked inside the tent. Inside was a filthy sleeping bag, a stack of torn magazines, and a camcorder. Not a phone or GoPro, but one of those old handheld camcorders with a flip-out screen. It was sitting on top of a spiral notebook filled with writing I couldn't read in the dim light. I picked it up. The battery light was flashing red, but when I pressed play, it still worked. There were only 2 videos saved. The first one was timestamped 3 nights ago. It was footage of someone walking through the corn at night, breathing hard, like they were being chased. The camera panned around quickly, like the person filming was paranoid. You could hear them whispering things like, stay low, he's still out here, he's still watching." The video ended abruptly with the sound of something snapping, maybe a twig, and the camera hitting the ground. The second video was shorter. It was filmed during the day. The camera sat on the floor of the tent, filming a shirtless man with matted hair and sunburned skin, rocking back and forth. He was muttering, mostly nonsense. But a few words were clear. He watches from the porch, keeps the girl inside, can't let him see me again. I nearly dropped the camcorder. I stood up fast, heart pounding, and sprinted back toward the path. I didn't stop until I was back at the house, drenched in sweat and shaking. I told Grandpa everything. He didn't say a word, just took the camcorder from my hands, set it on the table, and picked up the phone. He called the sheriff, who said he'd come by in the morning. We locked every door and window, and Grandpa kept his shotgun in his lap the whole night, staring out the front window. The sheriff showed up around 10 a.m. with one other deputy and a tracking dog. They went into the field, found the tent, followed the footprints down to the creek that ran behind our property. That's where the trail went cold. Turns out a man had escaped from a mental health facility 2 counties over a week earlier, had a long history of violence and delusions. He was last seen hitchhiking near our town. They think he was living in our cornfield, watching us, filming us for at least a few days, maybe longer. I don't know what his plan was, but I know this: he watched us from less than 300 feet away. He knew our routines, he knew where Abby slept, he knew when Grandpa walked the fields, and for days we had no idea.